here. So I'd like to hand over to Phemelo Motene, who who graciously agreed to do this. And we're hoping that we'll then have a lovely conversation this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us, everybody. As Ndate Hatang has said, my name is Phemelo Motene, and we're hoping to have an interesting conversation leading up to tomorrow, of course. And as you've been introduced, we have the Chief Justice here with us. And we're going to start with you as well, Chief Justice, before we interact with Prof. and ask you, first of all, the invitation, when the invitation arrived, why did you accept the invitation?
Well, is it on? I saw it as a responsibility to assume. A responsibility because I have for a very long time been reflecting on Nelson Mandela, the man, and what he stood for. What he has had to endure to get us to the point where a rock-solid foundation had been laid for us, if we wanted to make the most of the opportunities available to us. Now, what hit me was this. I immediately remembered that January last year, I was invited to the summit of the heads of states and heads of government at the AU, and the plenary hall they use is named after Madiba. And 2 July last year, I went to Geneva for some reason, and suddenly, without prior notification, suddenly, I think the day before, the UN asked me to address them because it was going to be the celebration of Madiba Day. Not only on a Wednesday, but also on a Friday. And that forced me then to reflect on what Madiba stood for. And finally, 17th of July this year, a foundation invited me to go and address issues relating to Madiba. So I saw it as yet another opportunity to remind myself and our people in South Africa and the world of who Nelson Mandela is and whether we're doing that which would have pleased him had he been around to witness what we were doing, or without realizing we're actually betraying the principles that he stood for. So that's why I'm here.
Prof, just if you can give us some context, sharing with us why you identified Chief Justice to be giving the lecture this time around, and what informed the theme of the lecture.
Well, first of all, just to say that for all of us at the foundation, both the staff and the trustees and all the people who support us, it's a great privilege to serve in the different capacities in which we serve at the foundation. And that gives us an awareness at all times of in the context of the breadth of impact that he has as an individual, not only in South Africa, but around the world. And so it is that perspective, from that perspective, that we approach our task, that everything we do, we hope, even if it's from an incident, one incident, specific incident like toilets, pit latrine toilets, beyond that specific incident, it has an impact that is national. And so in 2016, the trustees met we always do every year to review our strategy, and we came to the idea that we should embrace constitutionalism as a theme. There could be no better theme than that to to indicate the breadth of perspective that it promises. And in 2018, we invited Tembega, Advocate Tembega Ngugaitobi, to help us think through this theme. And our strategy from then to 2022 will be exploring different aspects of constitutionalism. Perhaps to conclude on that one is just to say that I think that, I'm speaking personally, not necessarily as a foundation, I think that the biggest challenge that South Africans face today is how, from our diversity, our enormous diversity, we have a one or two or three or perspectives that brings us together, and what we are all in search, therefore, of some sense of coherence as a country. And it could be a coherence around values that drive us, which are in the Constitution, coherence around expectations for each and every citizen, their responsibilities towards running the country. Our Constitution speaks clearly about the 3 tiers of government and how each of them have to look what the other is doing. The Constitution, therefore, conceived as a very activist document, calls on all of us. And I think it carries, therefore, the potential for all of us to find something in it that galvanizes our energies together. If I can stray a little bit, we've just had the big World Cup rugby. In 1995 was the first time that we had it. I think that in 1995, all of us were sort of reluctant. What's this rugby? I went to attend the rugby for the first time in my life on that final. And so all of us would say, what's this? But coming together. But in the end, we said, let's give it a go. Many years later, in 2019, I think you can agree that our perspective to the World Cup victory is very different. And I think we have gone beyond, let's give it a go, to we are one country, we are one people. It may be emotional, it may be sentimental, but it's something to work with. So what I'm trying to say, therefore, is that anything that can contribute to the sense of a collective sense of purpose will help us. And the Constitution is at the center of it all, because it is clear about what each and every one of us has to do. That's why we chose that as a theme.
Chief Justice, Prof has just made mention of the fact that your role you're playing now in society is quite open. I think you've decided to make it, you stand on podiums outside of the bench and make your statement known. Why do you do that? I mean, there's a school of thought that says, well, people in your position shouldn't be out there making those public statements that you make.
I love that question, because every opportunity that arises must be used to inform ourselves and to inform our people. The notion that a judge speaks through his or her judgment, where does it come from? Where can we look it up so that we can read it for ourselves and seek to understand the background and the context within which it arose? Did it come out of a society or a nation that has a constitution similar to the Constitution of South Africa? Was that statement made and adopted in a country that has the background similar to that of South Africa, and therefore challenges similar to those that confront South Africa? Was it made and adopted in a country that has vested in the judges, in the judiciary, the kind of extensive powers and responsibilities that have been vested in the judges of South Africa, I think it's based on a misunderstanding. And I would want to refer South Africans to an article that is often quoted by all, written by one of my predecessors, Pius Langa, Transformative Constitutionalism. From the beginning to the end, it's politics, and it's not surprising, because there really is very little that a judge does based on the Constitution that is not political in character. The only few things that you cannot touch on as a judge or chief justice because they are political is to go there and say, go and vote for so and so. You can't do that. In a nutshell, our struggle, our constitution, our challenges are all about the need to secure justice for the people of South Africa. And you can't talk justice and not talk about racism. You can't talk justice and not talk about the land. You can't talk justice and not talk about what Madiba refers to as either trade justice or economic justice. And you can't be shallow. You've got to drill deep and identify the dynamics below that which you are articulating. So, most of what I say as a matter of fact in the public domain are in the judgments that I have written or in the judgments that some of my colleagues have written. But with a little understanding, when you just heard somebody some time back without a proper understanding saying, a judge speaks through his or her judgments, you just grab it, run with it, meaning that I shouldn't even be here because I'm not here to deliver a judgment. And tomorrow I won't be delivering a judgment, and a judge speaks through his or her judgments. So the bottom line is there are issues that flow from what our Constitution demands of us to do as leaders, as citizens, that I'm often invited to articulate, and that's all I do. And it is right to do so.
You speak a lot about this society being very sick.
Yes.
And what challenges does this pose to building respect for the law and for the Constitution in this
Yes.
country?
I get to the challenges, but let me quickly say it's important to always reflect on the nature of this sickness. We need to diagnose it properly so that whatever medication we end up prescribing and dispensing to the sick is the correct one. Once you have a proper understanding of the fundamentals around the sickness, then you would know how to move forward. But going straight to the question, when society is sick, when society is desperate, when society has been largely stripped of its dignity, human dignity, expect desperate measures, expect actions that are irreconcilable with any vision to write home about, any purpose about life, and respect for the others. That is why you will never be able to explain why a student would burn the library or a school or some facility at an institution of learning that they need. You know you need it tomorrow. Why are you burning it? Burning clinics? But the criminal justice system must still arrest you because the law says you can't do that. People steal from shops. People break into others' houses and steal. It's a rule of law issue. It's a constitutional issue. What are you going to do about it? Now, we've got to these people are then arrested and brought to the courts. And we just have to say, well, this is what the law says. And apply the law. Not only does it increase our work beyond our capacity to handle it, but it has an unintended traumatic effect. You know, had we all been doing what President Nelson Mandela suffered for us to achieve, violence would not be at the scale where you find it. You wouldn't be finding a 60-year-old raping a 6-month-old child, 7 years. Rape, why? Why would you rape except you are sick? And the result is this widespread gender-based violence, corruption. You've got to be mentally damaged as a person who earns an income to then take that which is supposed to help the vulnerable, the poor, the homeless, set up some decent structures for them to inhabit. Mentally damaged. What happens? More work for us. And the image that our constitution says we must build for ourselves as a nation gets damaged. You go abroad, oh yes, how's corruption? The only positive thing they would ask you about is Madiba or the Springboks. So it complicates our situation. It undermines the rule of law, this sickness that manifests itself in one form of criminality or another, even racism. We would be far had we not allowed ourselves to continue to suffer from a sickness known as racism, tribalism. Tribalism is alive and kicking, ethnicity, and even xenophobia. Some of us are still xenophobic. Must listen carefully to our utterances. That's a manifestation of sickness. But when those incidents shoot up, what happens? You go to the equality court. You go to one adjudicator system or the other, bloating our workload unnecessarily in circumstances where we should be rendering quality judicial service to those few deserving instances where disputes need to be resolved.
Do you want to touch a little bit on how then we should deal with the sickness that you're talking about instead of running to the courts?
Well, the way to deal with the sickness, I think it's in the Constitution. The way to deal with the sickness is familiarizing ourselves with what President Nelson Mandela stood for. I mean, he not only signed the Constitution into law, but he went out of his way to give guidelines as to what is it that the Constitution demands of each and every one of us to do, so that it becomes a practical reality. That's where to go. You have constitutional office bearers, but you also have society. You have citizens, even corporate citizens. Each and every one of us has a responsibility to contribute towards the realization of our shared aspirations, because when you do, you kill in the disease, you kill in that sickness. A failure to do what we are supposed to do in line with the Constitution or Madiba's vision is the direct consequence. I beg your pardon. It gives birth or gave birth to the challenges that we have. So you've got to confront them and hold each and every one of us without exception accountable. This mind your own business attitude really explains where we are. It's not that when these problems begin, we're not aware of them. You can see this guy is corrupt. His position is administrative clerk or assistant director. But look at the vehicle that he drives. Look at the clothes he wears, the watches and the house, the lifestyle. You can tell. Why don't you approach the relevant authorities and say, people, you do well to check on this person. Find out, where does he get the money from? We allow it. We even copy them. Before we know it, we're all the same. And because I know I'm just like you, I don't have in law they would say locus standi. I don't have the standing, the right standing to say that one is a thief, because as I do, at least 3 fingers are pointing at me, and correctly so. So we really need to confront these things. We need to be more vocal than ever before. But coupled with that, is the need to inculcate the Madiba type, the constitution type value system in our children, in our peers, at every level, faith-based organization, everywhere. Let's be talking about what is happening that ought not to happen and how to turn it around. When you do that, it'll spread. Good things have a way of spreading, of impacting those in your circle of influence. As long as we adopt that approach and urge and plead with the media to help us push this project forward, I think we will get there.
Prof, we're going back to Soweto since the last time Nelson Mandela was in, well, the lecture was there is 2015. What's the significance of going back to Soweto?
Yes. Well, first of all, there was a question you asked that I didn't answer.
Yes, Prof.
And I'm going to answer it this way, that everything that the Chief Justice said, everything he said this morning is why we chose him to be our speaker. Soweto is a very symbolically, again, these are personal perceptions. I once wrote an article or gave a speech back in Germany many years ago, in which I reflected on the notion from Sandton to Soweto, and basically I was playing with the thought that the center of gravity of the South African economy has to shift, will shift, and the way it will shift in the most significant way is that the center of gravity of the economy one day, pretty soon, will shift from Sandton to Soweto. And once that happens, you're speaking to the reality that the bulk of the people of South Africa live in the townships. The townships were created by a system that had no interest in the people living there being human, except the only thing that they wanted out of them was to work and work and work and work for them. So we have a lot to work through as South Africans today. And one of them is, how do you make our living spaces human living spaces? And that calls for a lot of things which the Chief Justice has said are already in the Constitution. I was coming up on the plane, and my wife showed me an article on education from Japan. Startling thing, it says in Japan they don't have exams for kids between grade 0 and 4. And why? They say they spend the first 4 years learning how to relate to one another as human beings. I think it's a very profound policy, because I think that South Africans need to rediscover the importance of relating to one another at a basically human level, about civility, about respect, about loving one another, and all those things. And it is my dream, and I think partly the foundation, when we note the fact that Madiba, 30 years, is now, in February next year, is going to be 30 years that he returned to Soweto. And returning to Soweto is a kind of returning to the place where you were formed in so many ways. If you read The Long Walk to Freedom, Johannesburg Gauteng made all of us, and the impact of Gauteng over the years, you feel it when you go back to the rural areas, where you meet people in Eastern Cape. You assume that they are Xhosas, all they know is Xhosa. They surprise you with Sesotho and other things. And that's the same all over the country. In other words, throughout the years, one of the symbols of Soweto and the Gauteng area for me is breaking down the barriers of tribalism and the massive intermarriage that took place. So the significance of Soweto, therefore, remains as a kind of beacon where the prospects of a new civilization in South Africa are possible, and that goes for all major settlements across the country where the vast majority of the people are there. The way we run the economy has to change because the economy that we have inherited was structured to cater for a few people. So the mechanisms of the new economy has to change. And therefore we need a strong government that is able to recognize trends in the transformation of society and pursue policies that make that indigenous possible. I come from the writing area as a writer. There's so much flowering of literature, of new films, of dance forms, of fashion. That's where our economy is going to thrive. And if you consider the fact that one of the reasons we have these xenophobic things is the fact that communities from other African countries that have come to live there are far ahead of most South Africans in terms of trading, running businesses, and so on. It's normal in Nigeria, in Senegal, and everywhere. We did not grow up in that kind of environment. So South Africans, therefore, have to learn how to the very notion of a market in Soweto is a critical one. So I think it is possible if we focus on the structural levers that will make the future possible for all of us, particularly at the level of economy. And Soweto is a symbol for it.
Chief Justice, I'm going to come back to you and ask you this question about, there's this notion often that South Africa is unique, it's exceptional. From your international experience, to what extent do you think that the challenges facing this country are global and that they're not uniquely South African?
Well, the challenges that confront us are unique in certain respects, but not necessarily so, generally speaking. At times, our challenges, depending on which ones you have in mind, seem to be more serious in South Africa because we don't manage them the way others do. Let me explain myself. I went to one country which used to be on par with South Africa. In fact, South Africa was ahead of it in terms of economic development some 25 years ago. And I asked them, how did you get it right? Particularly because you people don't even have minerals and you're the size of KwaZulu-Natal back home. What is the difference? Is there no corruption here? I said, there's corruption, but it's well managed. I said, what do you mean? I said, you see, when our people get involved in corruption, say they've been awarded a tender in a corrupt way, they will deliver a quality service. And even when they steal so marginally that you must be a real expert to tell that there's been more taken than was supposed to be taken. Human frailty explains the similarity of our challenges. But I think there was a particular boldness that got injected in wrongdoing in South Africa. We got so used to wrongdoing and people were minding their own business, and we did more than defies logic in neglecting our responsibilities and even in stealing, in crime. So the scale at which we do wrong things tend to be a bit on the extreme. But otherwise, our challenges are sort of similar to what is happening elsewhere. There is another element that exacerbates the nature of our problems, and that is some of the countries that are more developed than we are don't have what we have. They are still able to feed their people. They are still able to manage things in such a way that jobs are created. There is some economic development to write home about. And yet, they really are nothing, so to speak, in terms of natural resources and mineral resources. We have a lot. And we have had a Mandela, celebrated all over the world, providing us with what I would refer to as a blueprint to run forward, not even to walk forward. And for some time, remember, we were doing well. I'm told when he took over, we had a deficit that ran into over 200 billion rands. But at the end of his presidency, we were in positive territory. How do you move from there to the point where, according to the Minister of Finance, at least last year, we're borrowing 1 billion rands every day? How do you get to the point where almost no state-owned enterprise is healthy? So whatever country you compare us to, it has never touched the level of economic development, the efficiency and level of competence in the economic sector that South Africa once touched. It never developed the kind of capacity to professionalize public service. We had professionalized it doing the wrong things, but those people in their wrongdoing, they would do. Not just the question of coming, hanging a jacket here, pretending to be at work when for some 3 months you never even reported for work. There was monitoring and evaluation. I think we went a bit to the extreme. But let me cut down on my secretary's reasoning. The bottom line is, there is gender-based violence in other jurisdictions. We are worse though. There is corruption in other jurisdictions. There are incompetent people in other jurisdictions. We just allowed ourselves to be extreme in our own doing. And maybe that's what we need to highlight now, so that we can move back on track at a faster pace.
Do you want to reflect on why you think we are extreme?
I think I'm just thinking aloud. I think we failed to learn from the experiences of other jurisdictions. We're not the first African country to be independent. We've had the luxury, for want of a better expression, of observing what others have been doing over the years, particularly in the continent we share with them. We have had the privilege of waging our struggle as South Africans in these countries, and therefore having limitless opportunities of seeing what is wrong and what is right. Now, I've even forgotten the question.
The question was, since we've diagnosed that we are extreme, even
Yes.
though others do similar mistakes, make similar mistakes, we are extreme. Why
Yes.
are we that way?
Why are we like that? Now, we failed to learn from them. There are things that government can do. There are things that only business can do. There are things that citizens have a larger role to play in ensuring that they are done than government. What we should have done, I think, from the very beginning, having drawn lessons from other jurisdictions, was this. What are the major problems? What did, for instance, countries like America do with the racial challenge and the gender issue over the years? Why is it that 1948 already you had a very powerful woman, Eleanor Roosevelt, doing so well, the first to discover that being a first lady doesn't mean just being there moving around your husband. There is so much more you can do to advance and champion the cause of women. To the point where she ensured that the first woman minister, or secretary as they call them, Frances was her surname, Minister of Labor, was appointed by her husband. Said, there are competent women here. Why don't you recognize them for who they are? Made sure that appropriate job opportunities are created on a massive scale for women. The United Nations and her nation had to back her to come and champion this convention on human rights. On human rights, she was chairing it. If you check it, 1948 one is like none other. 1946, 1948, you'll know it. It is the only one where you don't see his all the time. Gender is factored there just to demonstrate what a woman can do, a human being can do if we accord them their opportunity. I'm talking about the lessons. And during that period already, people were saying, this woman is going to be the President of the United States of America. She was an obvious candidate, particularly in recognition of the legacy of her husband. What happened? Why is it that nothing happened? What am I saying? Just focusing on the gender issue. We should have said the fact that Eleanor Roosevelt did not become what she was obviously qualified and entitled to become means that there must be a very deliberate effort to ensure that women realize their potential. Is that not what our Constitution says, the preamble? Free the potential of each person. And because the UK has failed, America has failed, any democracy you can think of has failed, let's identify what needs to be done differently to realize that objective, so that we too can at some stage make sure that any woman can occupy any position that they are appropriately qualified for. Where is our plan? You can't leave that to the Gender Commission. You've got to inject resources and, more importantly, train people specially for that responsibility and put people there who have a track record for implementation, not just talking and theorizing. But because we didn't do that, we are where we are. Women still have to march for obvious things because the obvious are not being done. Two, what about the racial issue? I mean, the racial issue started there, among other countries, in America, in Canada. I had a meeting with the Grand Chief of the Creek Nation in Canada and analyzing, how did you get the land issue right? How did you get the economy right? Your people were hunters. How did you develop them to the point where intellectuals like you are here, you are global players? That's what you do when you want to succeed where your peers have failed. My peers have failed, other African countries and even Western countries have failed. What is it that I must do differently? If America has still not been able to address meaningfully the racial issue, it means it's not just a question of having a highly progressive constitution. There is what to do, and there is how to do it, and there is who to do it, and effective monitoring of that which needs to be done. We should go there. We haven't done that. We should go there. So there should be systems in place. I mean, I would want to see a unit or even a department properly resourced that helps all of us to deal with the racial issue, the value system issue. I don't think the moral regeneration agenda will work. You want to push resources there so that you don't have a situation where a child can just stand up and beat up a teacher and people are just laughing. If he likes, he can just go and burn the school and you become a celebrity. No. You are sick. Diagnose the sickness. Let's address it. But you're going to need much more than rhetoric. I never understand when we expect of a minister of police, for instance, when people have been killed. I condemn this in the strongest terms. What do you mean? Your very appointment should be a condemnation in the strongest terms of wrongdoing, but not by word of mouth, through actions. So all that needs to be done, even the economy. How did others get it right? What concrete steps did they put in place? How do we need to, should we adjust them or adapt them to our conditions so that they can work for us? And make sure that there is effective monitoring and evaluation. And anybody who doesn't perform gets fired. Anybody who steals gets arrested and punished. Institutions have got to be strong. Leaders must be strong, because that's a critical thing. The stronger the leader, the more comfortable we ought to be that something will be done, because the person will be steering. You see how effective the prof and the CEO are. That's why things are working here.
So I was going to challenge you on that.
Yes.
Because you see the departments being set up.
Yes.
You see these committees being set up. So in other words, resources, aesthetically, things being done. Still, there are problems. So you see in the Office of the President, there is the Department of Women and Gender and Disabled People.
Yes.
And that's been there for a while.
Yes.
But things are not moving.
Yes. Well, contrary to what a few people think, I know my place. I raise issues, but I try my best to raise them in a very nuanced way, and I try my best to articulate principles rather than say, look at so and so, they are failing. What about so and so? I think it's counterproductive, because when you do that, even with criticism in the media, you're going to be distracted. Instead of pouring your energies where they would be more beneficial for all of us, you're now going to be in a combat with other people. It's counterproductive. The position that we leaders must adopt is that people must criticize us, and rightly or wrongly, it's their constitutional right. Stay focused, learn from criticism. So things are like that, my sister. You know why? And they'll continue not to work wherever they are not working. Because we're sitting back. We're not doing anything about it. I have made a very conscious decision. When I see something not being done right, I say, okay, does the Constitution allow me to raise my voice here? Yes. When the likes of Prof invite me and give me a topic that allows me to articulate problem areas and attempt a solution at them, I will. I see it as my responsibility. Why can't every citizen do that? Don't just identify problems. Identify a solution and encourage others to do the same. This country belongs to all of us. I'm not going to sit back and be pigeonholed by people and say, no, you are a judge. A judge speaks only through judgments. No, a judge speaks through all sorts of means of communication, even by preaching.
Prof, I mean, it's quite evident, you said it earlier, this is why we have the Chief Justice here, this energy that we're going to get even tomorrow. How is the foundation going to move it forward?
Well, we have already indicated earlier that our strategy is over a number of years, to 2020, 2022, and a lot of our work through the dialogue mechanism that we use, through our ability to interact with like-minded organizations and people that, well, not only, actually I must take that back, because what is so important about our dialogues is that we put together people who don't want to talk to each other and create a space where they do that. So it's not only like-minded people that we want to talk to, but also people who think differently. And because of the interactions that occur, then we arrive at a new understanding that jointly contributes to changing the paradigm, in the world, in our environment. So for the next couple of years, we will be working at that, particularly on the issue of constitutionalism. And part of, if I were to reflect a little bit on what the Chief Justice just said about, is that sometimes things don't change because we are not sufficiently decisive in making them change. And there's a big danger to that. If you study the institution of slavery in the United States, you realize that there were moments in the United States when slavery could have ended, but it didn't. And partly, you remember that is the Union government in the northern states did a lot to change slavery in the South, but they wanted to, but they were not sufficiently committed to change it. So when the Union Army was removed from the South, the Southerners had a field day. The lack of will, therefore, compounded the problem that it was meant to solve. I think we have lessons, that has lessons for us here. The slower you go, the ponderous method, accommodating this and accommodating that, and that compound has a risk of compounding the problem instead of solving it. But I have to say that in respect of our particular situation, you also have a responsibility to identify what is it that you can do meaningfully, and that despite the fact that you want to change something, you got to have the wherewithal to change it. So sometimes the wheels of justice grind very slowly, but if there is a focus and a determination not to go back, the system will change, and where the pressure points are touched that will make a significant difference are actually touched, it will have a cascading effect, and society will get different and better over time.
Thank you, Professor Ndebele. Ladies and gentlemen, also Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng. Thank you, everybody. Ndate Hatang. Over to you, Ndate Hatang.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. If we can, please give them another round of applause. This was, again, I haven't seen Prof. permanently smiling as he was today. I commented to my colleagues there, look at Prof. There was a permanent smile. Again, there's a sense that all of us need to always just observe that when someone such as the Chief Justice just does the work with such humility, it's commendable. I found it interesting that the Chief Justice never met Madiba in person, but your closing comment about that was, this is better than meeting him in person. So may we always just remind ourselves that it's not about meeting Madiba and shaking his hand. It's about preserving, protecting, promoting his legacy through the values that are held in the Constitution. I thought I should maybe just note a couple of things as we wrap up. To again thank everybody who's here, particularly people who make this possible. Hansarel Foundation, ABSA, which is there, Brand South Africa, UJ, who will be hosting us tomorrow in Soweto, Samsung. We are enabled by Samsung, just noting, if you see best photos, they come from a Samsung. If you can't pronounce it, it's a Samsung. If you have to think highway, Huawei, what, it's Samsung. Again, Prof is using the right phone, except it's half bitten. So who uses a fruit that's half bitten? That's why it doesn't take good photos, Doc. This is a complete product. Anglo Gold, Ashanti, Kaya FM, and SABC rather, who are our two broadcast partners. I think the Chief Justice touched on something that we again want to note, that it's never just about an individual, but about the system, systems that enable individuals to thrive and do corruption and do all these things that we then speak against. If you look at Zimbabwe, the removal of President Mugabe and his subsequent passing on did not stop the new government from beating up opposition supporters when they went to march, when the Constitution actually allows them to. So I think if we are fooling ourselves that it was, even the last 10 years, were just about an individual in the form of our former President Zuma, we're fooling ourselves. And I want to again just thank the justice system that we're seeing the results of work that's been done, that some have been arrested and more will be arrested, hopefully, so that they then account. They can appeal 50,000 times. It's okay. Let them appeal. I see some are appealing even today. There are others who are in court now again appealing. They may appeal, but the system has to hold them accountable. I think the Chief Justice said, we South Africans allowed ourselves to be extreme in our wrongdoing. It is time now to be extreme in our doing right, should be the message that we then pass on with this lecture. And that we be more vocal in what we need to do and take stronger stances and action whenever needed so that a socially just society can be built. That we should be learning from we should have learned from other countries, and we should also be continuing to learn. Ven and I were talking about how in the 90s our greatest failure, Chief Justice, was how we went to Canada to look at the education system. We went to Canada, Australia, instead of looking at Ethiopia, looking at Zimbabwe, Botswana. We have Botswana here. Looking at Botswana, how did they get it right? Their context is similar to ours. We went north, global north, instead of global south. May we henceforth, with your message, go south and try and learn from them. As we, again, acknowledge that there are moments that are very important in this, in our histories, that Ndade Pius Langa always used the epilogue of our interim constitution to say it was a bridge, always saying it was a bridge towards a more equal society, a bridge towards, in other words, the new constitution would be that. I want to read to you what the epilogue of that constitution said, that it's a historic bridge between the past of a deeply divided society, characterized by strife, conflict, untold suffering and injustice, and a future founded on the recognition of human rights, democracy, and peaceful coexistence and development opportunities for all South Africans, irrespective of color, race, class, belief, or sex. We are hoping that this constitution will be that for all of us, that it delivers that which was a dream of Ndade Pius Langa. But as we close, I want to close off on a Kaizer Chiefs note. Sorry, I couldn't help it. It's an important moment. It's a constitutional matter, actually. I want to acknowledge that Maritzburg, it's just to acknowledge Maritzburg fans who are here. There's two Maritzburg fans in the sea of Kaizer Chiefs fans. I want to acknowledge them and wish them well with the game that's coming, because we are going to do what needs to be done. So, Chief Justice, I'd like to now ask all of us to, maybe at this point, if we can remain seated while the Chief Justice, Aus Phemelo and Prof, leave the room, and then we will be ushered out afterwards. If you stand up, it means that you are the Chief Justice. if by sitting down, it means that you are not the Chief Justice. So Chief Justice and our trustees, if our trustees can also leave with them. Thank you very much for coming.